You're watching or listening to Strangers in Space, and for the next 60 minutes, maybe, there's only 3 of us. There's 13 of us in our WhatsApp group, and 3 of us have turned up for this podcast on a Stephen Moffat episode in Russell T Davies era Doctor Who. What the hell is going on? And that's what we're going to be talking about.
10 of it's yeah. Then we're on to liars. Then we're on to.
So you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
I'm Dylan.
Hi, I'm John.
So it seems like way too soon in the series, doesn't it, for it to be Stephen Moffat already? Doesn't it?
8 episodes. Yeah, where do you fit him in 8 episodes? You've got to break up the Russell.
See, I guess
Russell doesn't think that.
Well, no, maybe not. Well, before we get into the sort of how does it work, why does it work, what's it about, is it any good, what we will talk about,
Spoilers, everyone.
I'm assuming there is nobody is watching or listening to this who's not seen the episode already. So was that well kept? We'll talk about it. But the Stephen Moffat thing is this. Davis knows that Moffat is the other big name in Doctor Who. Doctor Who fandom knows, regardless of what they think of him, that Moffat is the other big name in Doctor Who. And even most of the people who don't like sort of Moffat era Doctor Who tend to like the Moffat episodes in the Davis era. So before we talk about the episode itself, is it a bit strange to throw Stephen Moffat episode in this early? Or is this Russell T Davies saying, you've got me, you know what to expect with me, here's a little curveball, and then you're back to more of me? I don't know what you think. Go on, Dylan.
I don't think he thinks about it like that. I mean, I think he was just like, I need somebody to write one of the other episodes. Like, I don't think there's a big game plan or master plan by getting Moffat in. It's just, who do I know who can deliver a good script on time? I mean, the good script's debatable, but we'll get to that.
Okay, but I'm...
Girl in the Fireplace was only the 4th episode of that second season. So
of the second season.
You're talking an equivalent kind of point, really.
But the reason I've brought it up is because I think this is tonally very different from what we've had for the last 2 weeks. 3, if you include Church on Ruby Road. Davis has obviously deliberately said, right, week 3 we'll do something that feels very different. I tell you what, Girl in the Fireplace, that's one example, but I tell you the example that I'm thinking of instead. This is a bit like Dalek in Series 1. In Series 1, the first 5 episodes were all fun, they were all big, they were all brash. 3 of them were Keith Boak, the other 2 were Eros Lynn, and I think Eros Lynn was taking his lead from what Keith Boak had been doing. Well, no, tonally, John. I'm talking tonally.
Maybe, so, yeah. We'll come to it.
No, the tone of End of the World and Unquiet Dead was big, brash, silly, with a sort of side helping of serious notes, but basically big, brash, silly, cartoon-style Doctor Who. And Dalek is when you pulled the tone right back and said, right, let's stick a bunch of people in a single location, a sort of enclosed, entrapped location, and see what that does to the characters. And we'll take our foot off the gas, we'll take the tone right down, and we'll see how that plays with these characters in this era of Doctor Who. And I think that's what this episode is doing here now. This is take your foot off the gas, take the tone right down, and see how these actors fare in a version of Doctor Who that's not something that they've been doing so far. And I think that's what this episode is very much doing. So let's go. I mean, unless anybody wants to argue, that's right, isn't it? I'm not like talking out of my backside when I say that, am I?
No, I think so. Because again, if you bear in mind that Russell T is basically saying it's a new era of Doctor Who for the wider world, the streaming thing to introduce people. It's this show can do the big cartoony sci-fi stuff, but it can also do this.
Yeah.
And it gives it deliberately.
The funny thing is, and it's a gear shift after you've had 3 episodes. I think the first 3 episodes basically were all pretty much of a muchness. They're all big, they're all brash, they're all shallow, they're all superficial. None of them had much story going on. They were all so okay. I tell you what. Before we get any further into this, Dylan, before I go around the table and find out what we thought of this one, Dylan, there is an egg timer here. It's got 58.5 seconds worth of white sand in it, which I'm assuming is actually salt or something instead. I'm calling it white
salt.
Sand.
You can't invoke salt.
Yourself, yeah, not the edge of the universe.
My cameras, for some reason, so new computer, so my camera is got me so bright on this video that you can't actually see the salt. But believe me, it's in there.
It's JR's halo. We can't make him out over it.
Halo. Right, Dylan, you've got 58.5 seconds. I mean, you can divide it half and half, or you can just give me an encapsulated view. But 2 episodes last week, you've got 58.5 seconds just to let me know what you thought, or just to let me know, and John know, and the listener and viewer know.
I know already.
We know. I'm doing this for the sake of the listener. Dylan,
Drama.
58.5 seconds on Space Babies and the Devil's Cord. Go!
No comment. No. I hated
You
the
wasted
Space Babies.
several seconds there. You wasted. And now I've wasted even more seconds by talking.
You let JR talk, you'll take the whole minute off you.
Yeah,
I
that was
basically
a bad mistake to start with.
Yeah.
You could have just gone. You could have just
Rookie error.
But what you didn't do, you gave me a space. You invited me into the space, and you know better than all people, and John certainly can attest to this. Once you've invited me into a space,
He's a vampire.
Dylan, you've got about 33 seconds left.
Okay, well, I hated Space Babies. You basically said it all last week. I agree with everything that you said. I thought it was the worst episode of Doctor Who I've ever seen. I thought it was one of the worst bits of television I've ever seen. The Devil's Cord was a lot of fun. Had a great time. Doesn't really hold together, but it worked for me because it was big and it was brash. I don't like Millie, and I really liked Nshuti's performance in those 2 episodes.
Oh, wow, and you timed that. You can't even see the sound in here, and you timed it exactly to when it finised running through. That's amazing.
Emmy Award-winning professionalism.
It is Emmy Award-winning professionalism.
Just to, I'm going to sound like a twat saying this, but did we all get the...
does that make any difference?
Did we all get the memo last week about how
Emmy
to say...
Award-winning twat? Is that what we're saying? Yeah.
The memo about how to say Nshooty, which is his name, not Shooty Gatwa as we've been calling him. Everyone's been calling him.
It's his fault because he said that for 25 years, isn't it? And then he said, no, it's his mum rang him up and said, no, it's Nshooty.
Yeah, so he's been saying his name wrong, as have we, but his name is Nshooty Gatwa.
Oh, where did this come out?
It was on the official BBC feed. It was like a little video.
Yeah, him and Millie together, and he was explaining.
Wow. Do we have to start calling her Millie as well?
No, we don't.
You can call her what you want.
Okay. I don't know whether... I think we probably will carry on with Shooty, right?
I'm going Nshooty.
Oh, yeah? Okay, let's try it. It's one of those things where... Yeah, I know, but it's one of those things where once it's already settled...
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a bit older than you, but once you get past the age of 50, once something's settled in, you can't really replace it.
Maybe we could just call him Gatwa.
Well, I normally do anyway, because I'm not like Lee, where I think everybody's on first name terms with all of the doctors. These are people at the other end of a television screen. I am not on first name terms with these people.
Fair.
Right, let's go round in a circle. Let's go round in a circle. And you've got... So normally when people do this, they say you've got 1 sentence, or you've got 20 seconds, or you've got 3 words. But I'm going to give you 2 seconds to come up with a 3-word sentence to describe how you felt about last night's, this morning's, this afternoon's, today's, whatever, Doctor Who. Boom. 3-word sentence. So you're not allowed to just go, ooh, spectacular, awful, terrible. You have to actually form a sentence out of those 3 words.
Right, I'm there.
Okay, so you're there, but I'm going to go with John first then.
It's a banger.
Oh, John liked it. Oh, now you've stolen my 3 words. You have not actually stolen my actual 3 words, but I was just going to say, it went boom!
And I'm going to say, not very good.
That's interesting. I know where you're coming from, Dylan. I think it worked in spite of itself.
I have watched it twice, and I can't even tell you what happened in it. I'm that uninterested in what I saw on television.
Wow. Did you not like it?
Landmine for 40 minutes. There you go.
The second time, was that better or worse than the first time?
It was just boring. Like the first time I had the anticipation, and for the first 10-15 minutes I was in. The second time I could not engage with it at all, and this was the episode where Gatwa has lost me as the Doctor. I just don't think he's very good.
Wow, I thought this was the episode where Gatwa became the Doctor.
Interesting.
It's that kind of episode that they did every so often for Tennant and Smith, particularly, where they try and stretch the actor. You know, your Midnight, say, or your Capaldi, with Heaven Sent. It's you give the Doctor a showcase. I think that's what part of the reason they put this episode here. You want them to see what Gatwa could do. You've introduced him now to the audience with the first 2 episodes, and they're big adventure. Three, yeah. But those 3 episodes, they're not particularly stretching him as an actor. You've got to know the character now. This is what this Doctor's like. This is what he can do, and essentially, it goes back to one of Moffat's kind of obsessions about Doctor, that he's at his weakest when he's standing still. How do you take his strength away from him? And that's what the episode's all about, essentially. He can't move. He's only got his talk. He can think, but he can't take any actions. He wants that Doctor standing still. What do you do without his tools? And by tools I mean his skill set, not necessarily just his sonic screwdriver.
Well, that's the review then. So, Dylan, do you want to give this a score? I'll tell you how I feel about it. I thought in The Giggle, because you also had David Tennant there, so you had 2 Doctors there. And so those 2 actors couldn't both do the bright, brash, funny Doctor sort of thing that Tennant does and that Gatwa does. I thought you got to see a little bit of Gatwa's more serious side in that episode. But then I think from the Church on Ruby Road onwards, we've not really seen much, if anything, of that again. And so we've seen, for the last 3 episodes, we've seen Gatwa and Gibson bouncing around. But I thought, and you will have heard me say this last week then, I don't think the chemistry between them that's clearly there in the people, I don't think that comes across on screen brilliantly, because there's so much bouncing around. There's no interaction between them because they're bouncing everywhere. It's like watching 2 rabbits bouncing around in a field.
It's a cartoon, as you said.
But just to finish that thought, but this week, I think because you took him out of that and then had her moving around him, I thought the chemistry this week was way, way better. I thought his performance this week had way, way more weight to it. I thought the whole thing was a lot more organic in terms of the acting. And although I think towards the end of the episode, she started bouncing again, which kind of irritated me a bit. She can't seem to help herself.
Well, she stopped bouncing for a fair while, let's face it.
She did, yeah. And then just before that, and when she came out of that, I was like, oh no. I thought she was fine when it was just the 2 characters. Then when the other characters came in, it was like she went back into bouncing mode, if you know what I mean. But I think he was brilliant throughout. I really liked him. This was you being able to see the other side of the facade that Russell T Davies Doctors always have.
Right. I just find that he's got 2 modes. One is the bouncy mode and one is crying, and I just don't think he's got any range. And I think whenever he deviates from either of those 2 things, he shows his weaknesses as an actor.
Oh, wow. Right, do you want me to knock you out of this call now, Dylan? Do you want to give me a score? What did you think?
Sorry, I was just going to say, no, I'm there. I was on board with him for the first 2 episodes, but I just didn't gel with him at all in this. I don't particularly like her either. I don't think she's a very good actor. I think she'd be fine on a Broadway show, but I don't think she's got the chops to be the lead in an international television series.
She was really good in Coronation Street. I'm weirded out by what she's doing in Doctor Who. Because in Coronation Street, she really gave you a proper character, made you feel like she was a real person. In this, I'm not really getting. Maybe though, this is deliberate.
Yeah, I mean, there's a tone to this whole series, and even like there's a little clip that's come out of next week's and the next time trailer, and like the directorial choices, it's like nothing on television at the moment. I don't think they're the right choices. I think it looks like next week looks like an episode of Goosebumps or something like that. It's like it's like they've made this choice to make the whole series this weird, fun, heightened reality, and I just cannot get on board with it at the moment.
See, I liked that when they did that in the first series, because I think that's how they. I've said this, and I said it 10 minutes ago. I think this is how they started the Eccleston series, and I was on board to see that carry on for the entire series. I was looking forward to seeing how that felt when it went to other places. But like I say, from Dalek onwards, I don't think they were doing that anymore. I think they stopped doing that. I think, last week, the tone I'm fine with, the ideas I'm fine with. The first 2 episodes, it was the lack of any kind of story or narrative or plot that bothered me. And so the sort of one-dimensional tone of it became a problem, because there was one-dimensional tone, a one-dimensional plot, one-dimensional character. Everything was one-dimensional. And I think the cartoon thing only works if everything has got at least 2 dimensions that the story can sort of revolve around and move through. And this week, I thought it got that back.
Interesting. Not for me. It didn't. It's just it was a real. It's not. It was okay, but I think when you've got 8 episodes, I think every one of them needs to be a belter. And so far, they have not. That has not worked for me.
John, what did you think of Shooty Gatwa then? Shooty Gatwa. It's not Shooty, it's Shooty.
Shooty.
Yeah. What you need in this story, it's an actor to sell the intensity. It doesn't necessarily mean the range of forms, because I think you're essentially locked in one mode for the entire episode. It's how you sell that mode, and he's very good with the tears, and he's very good at conveying what's behind the Doctor's eyes there, I thought, because this is very much something you're selling on the Doctor's thinking. Again, it's one of Moffat's obsessions. And he does sell that for me.
Yeah. I thought he was really good when he realised what the problem was, and you had that sequence where he's singing and she's coming towards him. But once she arrived there and he was having to do that, right, I need you to tell me what this thing looks like. I need you to do this thing. That whole sequence where she's bringing the thing towards him and he's afraid that she's going to get caught in the blast, so he wants her to stand further away, and that. I thought the pair of them were really, really good there, really powerful.
Yeah,
in convincing you of the enormity of what was happening, and she was convincing you that the enormity of her feelings for him and for what they were doing went above and beyond the issue of, well, if it blows up, I'm going to get caught anyway, probably. I thought that whole sequence was terrific.
Yeah, it's a scene that sells the episode. I don't know if either of you watched the In Vision commentary. I think that scene was a later edition where it's how do they sell the peril. Right. That's exactly what it shows you the scale, it shows you the stakes, it shows you the consequences. So in that case, that's what they sold that story. And I think if they don't sell it there for you, it's not going to work. But it did work for me. So
one of the criticisms I saw of this, though, was that the other characters were not very well drawn, were not very interesting. I guess in the way that maybe Moffat made the other characters interesting in Silence of the Library, for example. You cared about those characters, and I think the suggestion was that you don't care about these ones so much. I don't think that was quite right, though. Dylan, you want to...
I don't think you care about any of the supporting characters in this version of Doctor Who. I didn't in the other episodes. Ruby Road being the obvious exception, where you meet Ruby's family and you're like, okay, these are people I care about. But this version of the show is not interested in telling stories about other people or getting you to like or feel anything for them. So as a result, when one of them dies, I couldn't give a shit.
See, that was fair enough for the last 2 weeks, but then I thought this week got that back. Not all the way back, but I
Right.
thought this week was much better than the last 2 weeks had been. So at the end of this episode, I was caring about the people. I tell you what,
It's military personnel. They're all doing that same job. They're all in the same situation. So it's very difficult to bring in that different background, the different tones of voice.
I tell you what I think it was, though. It's not so much when one of the characters got killed. I don't think I cared about the character who was getting killed. But when that character then continued to interact with the other characters, I think I cared about the characters who survived the death and how they felt about the death. So Varada Sethu, right? Her character, when she's talking to the guy who she's just discovered does have feelings for her, the whole bit where they say to each other, "Oh, I've got feelings for you after all," that bit wasn't so great. But the bit when he dies and then he turns up, and so she's interacting with him still, then I felt for her because she'd just lost the thing that she thought she'd just found. And I was convinced enough in the actor and in the character that I cared in that moment rather more than I cared when the actual death happened.
I didn't even clock that it was her, to be perfectly honest.
I didn't properly clock it till the end credits. I went, hang on.
Oh, right.
I had to rewind the end credits. Oh, it is. Blimey.
I noticed about 20 or 20. Okay, let's talk about this then. I think I noticed about 20 or 25 minutes in. And then, because when we did this with Clara, right, we had a whole load of publicity about the fact that Jenna Coleman was about to join. So we were all very familiar with the fact, and she had been filming, I think.
Yeah.
But they've obviously kept. So Varada Sethu has obviously filmed an entire series, but there's been one small press release. There's been hardly, because they've been using the volume, I think, in series 2.
No, it's not. It's not the volume. This is on the commentary. It's Unreal Engine. I think it's a big screen. Yeah,
it's a very similar thing. What they're doing, it's a portable variation of it. So somebody's got this version of it that they have in a giant van or something that they drive around to various film studios around the country with, or something, as I understand it. Anyway, point being, they've not been out on location very much, and they've just had this one small press release in which they've not actually said anything about the character. And so we didn't really know much about her, and she's under a hell of a lot of dirt and grime, and with very short hair in this. I don't know whether you were supposed to realise.
I don't even know whether they'll mention it, whether it's the same character or a splinter or anything like that. I think it's just that Martha Jones situation of she had a role in one episode and then they cast her as somebody else in another and nominally sort of went, "Oh, my cousin worked for Torchwood."
Or right, I'm going to read something that came in from, here we go, Dave Bain. So Dave Bain, so this was just this morning, says, replying about our review from last week of Space Babies and Devil's Cord, he says, "Great review, guys. I'm 100% with JR on these episodes."
And then you can't account for people.
And then
Look
he
at
says,
Brexit, for God's sake.
And then he says, that doesn't normally happen. I'm just going to put it out there that I think sometimes my kind of vision is just a little bit too special for a lot of people.
Special's the word.
He says, but the reason why I'm reading it out, the reason why I saved it, because I said, oh, I think I'll bring that up, because we talked about this last week anyway. He says, on the fourth wall stuff, we know RTD is a magpie. What about WandaVision, anyone? So could this be the TV series of the TV series Doctor Who that we're watching? And actually, funnily enough, when we were doing the review of Wild Blue Yonder, I think it was, we also said then maybe this is the land of fiction that we're going into or something. And we've said that last week. I think we also had a discussion about this kind of thing. So okay, let's do this now. There's a lot of fourth wall breaking. There's this whole thing about the snow turning up in places where the snow isn't supposed to be turning up. There's this thing about Barada Sethu's the new companion, but Ruby Sunday, there's this whole thing about, is Ruby Sunday really Ruby Sunday as well? And of course you've got this backstory where you don't know where Ruby comes from anyway. And Davis, because clearly Moffat's script was written in collusion with Davis, right? So you've got the snow this week, and you've also got, harkening back to in Space Babies, Ruby's taking her first trip, and there's quite a lot of talk in that episode, isn't there, about her wanting to find out who her real mum or stroke mum and dad is. She brings that up at least twice in that episode. In fact, the episode starts and ends with that, and I think it's somewhere in the middle too, that it's a constant concern of the series. Who is Ruby Sunday? Where's she from? And also, what's really going on? Because apparently magical things are happening. And although there weren't any instances this week, I don't think, of the fourth wall being broken, there's still, you had the snow thing, and still you had the who is Ruby Sunday thing. So
and Susan
I think
turning up.
Oh, and Susan not just turning up, she's quite a major part in the episode, isn't she? And she's turning up in a way. So this is kind of my point. When Clara turns up several times, that's different splinters of Clara. They're people. All of those people are actual people who are splintered from the original person, but each one of them is like a flesh and blood human being in their own right, who exist independently of each other. The Susan Twist thing is, she's turned up as an AI. She's turned up in various places. If she was supposed to be a character who is watching Ruby, keeping an eye on Ruby, she wouldn't turn up in the places she's turned up because they're so random. Like the dinner lady at Abbey Road Studios, right? The tea lady at Abbey Road Studios. That's not for somebody who's been there at Abbey Road Studios as a tea lady for weeks or months or years or whatever, on the off chance that the Doctor and Ruby are going to turn up there. And she's also not randomly a splinter in the way Clara was. So what Susan Twist is, in real life and perhaps in the series, is she's an actor who's getting multiple parts, because by giving the same actor multiple parts, you get them for cheaper than if you had 12 different actors in 12 different episodes, right? What I'm saying is, it looks more and more like what we are watching is the television series of Doctor Who. Because there's no, I mean, unless either of you two has an idea, there's no other explanation. And when I say the television series of Doctor Who, I'm speaking in the most general of terms, because I don't think what we're watching is the television series of Doctor Who. But what I mean is, I think we're watching somebody telling the story of somebody telling the story of Doctor Who, if you see what I mean. Unless you can figure some other way that an actor can turn up week after week in different roles that don't connect.
Well, she's a god. I mean, I don't buy the notion that this season's somehow going to be undone in a way, which I think is what a lot of people who say, oh, it's all some sort of fiction or something like that. But I don't think
just on that note, Russell T Davies doesn't do that, because that undermines how the audience and the characters can sort of have feelings, empathy, can care about one another, right?
I just don't think anybody's thought about the logic of this universe. I think Russell T Davies writes what he wants, does what he wants, and he doesn't care that it all doesn't fit together. I think it's just bad writing, if I'm perfectly honest.
Possibly, but the thing I'm getting is, again, I'll go back to Too Hot TV territory. Conundrum is the one for me, because it wasn't advertised as a Land of Fiction story. It was, you read it and it's like, oh, hang on, and then the twist is you get, oh, it's Land of Fiction, particularly with the narrator. But obviously you haven't got that central narrator on a TV show.
Shall I tell you a story idea I had once many, many years ago? And this clearly isn't that, but I'll say this as an illustration of the kind of thing that I wonder about. I had an idea that maybe you could do the time meddler, sending the TARDIS back through, in a sort of time paradoxical fashion, various of the Doctor's old adventures. So you could have, for example, a remake of the Dalek invasion of Earth, not with a first Doctor and a current Doctor, but with just the current Doctor doing the story, and maybe getting things different, because you go in, you do it differently, but ultimately come into eventually, I suppose, the same place. And you would do that with maybe 10 different stories, and the Doctor twigs after about 3 of them, why am I just redoing things that I've already done from the past, and where am I and where should I be? I get my point of this is that's one idea of a way you could send the Doctor into old adventures. These are clearly not old adventures, but clearly at the same time the Doctor's been massaged into things that aren't quite real.
You could do Paul McGann in Sharda, couldn't you? That'd be great.
Yeah, you could. Do you know what I mean though? It's a way of taking a fiction that already exists and changing it and giving it an in-universe explanation for why you can go over the same thing a second time. And so I'm sort of half on board with what Dylan says about it's just bad writing. It's not going to add up to anything. It's just Russell T Davies having a bit of fun and he doesn't know where he's taking it. But I think he does, because I think it's too few episodes and he's signaled that he's taking it somewhere enough that even if he doesn't make it add up, I think it adds up in his head. So it's a bit like Midnight. I don't think Midnight adds up at all. And I don't think Wild Blue Yonder really adds up at all either. But they add up in Russell T Davies's head. And so what I'm trying to do is imagine where Russell T Davies is and how he's making it add up. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, yeah. I mean, maybe he's got some logic, but I mean, wasn't there a thing in an interview that you said about last week, the musical number, he was going to put in a line going, oh, it's a bit of residual energy from the maestro, and he decided to drop that line, so it's just a big musical number. I think he's always got. You remember he said he used to have a more science fiction version of the story worked out, but he went for the sort of populist version.
Yeah.
I don't think he cares that it might make sense to him, but I don't think he cares that it perhaps doesn't make sense to a viewer.
I think you're right, but I also think that he has to make it sort of add up in the populist non-science fiction sense. So I think something's going to have to be going on a bit more. Plus, we know that in episode 7, the TV cameras are back and Ruby Sunday is back on television talking about her adoption and her life and where she's come from. And this is all going to come to a head in some way there. So I don't know. For me, I don't think it's a television program, but I think maybe the television program is a symptom of what's actually happening. So when you say because when you say Susan Twist is a god, I'm like, yeah, but a god doesn't just sort of turn up in all these random guises not doing anything. Because gods, actually, the point of gods, I mean, Roman gods, Greek gods and that, is when they come down to Earth and interact with man, it's in order to press buttons and do things. They don't just come down and sort of stand there being a sort of AI creation watching, if you know what I mean. I think it's going to have to be a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah, well,
So
if you look in Conundrum does the fourth wall breaking. The Doctor talks directly to the reader at one point.
Does he?
Yeah. So it may be the conundrum, the conceit of the Doctor actually being in a Doctor Who novel. You're reading it. It might just be that transferred to you're watching the television series of the television series.
Yeah, maybe.
So it's the idea's there, and Russell has used the New Adventures before. So
yeah, sure. I don't know. It's hard to say, isn't it? So, okay, let's go back and talk about this episode for a bit. It's a Moffat. We all know how Moffat works, and he kind of likes to put all the cards on the table in front of you, but like he puts them on the table in such a way that you don't notice they're there until it gets towards the end of the episode, and suddenly all the characters are pointing at the cards and say, "Didn't you notice that was the Ace of Spades or whatever?" So you've got the fact that they're actually fighting a war against nothing. Did you twig before the reveal of that?
I can't remember whether I twigged, but...
Oh, you did. You said it was the Armageddon factor halfway through.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. Well done, me. So I did twig. Well done, John. It's all but I kind of thought, oh, we're not doing this again, are we? So I thought perhaps it'd be something else.
I think, though, because I don't know if we've done that on television with Stephen Moffat. So I think that was new for Stephen Moffat and maybe new for new series as
No,
well.
the Doctor's daughter has a similar conceit, doesn't it? They've only been fighting the war for like a week or something like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. But I think this was enough of a twist away from that I thought it worked. But
it is very Moffat though. It's one of the broken spring stories. That system gone wrong. But I think in this case, part of the thing, the system has deliberately gone wrong.
For sure. Oh, I liked that. We'll get into the politics in a second.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that made it work in this one, particularly for me, is because normally when you get a twist like that, that's the twist, and then it plays out. You've discovered what is going on, and you have to play that out. And there was a way in which it looked like this episode was going to play out, because in order to get the Doctor's foot off the mine, in order to get Ruby Sunday fixed, what you had to do was get the perpetrator of the war, the Grand Marshal or whatever, whoever it was, to surrender so that they're no longer at war, so the ambulance is allowed to fix Ruby Sunday, and so that the mine gets decommissioned and the Doctor can take his foot off it. And it sets that up, and you think that's where it's going to go. And for me, the nice twist was not, oh, it's actually a war against nobody. But the nice twist for me was that the father went into the AI, and it was him who brought the AI down, rather than just because they surrendered, the AI turned itself off. And so you never actually got the moment of surrender, because that would have been like in the Doctor's daughter, where, oh, we've been fighting this war for 7 days. Oh, okay, that's all right. Everything's fine now. That was all too quick, too superficial. Here, I thought it had more substance, because it was all about the person going in and sorting it out, rather than just some figure you'd never met and just at the end of a radio somewhere saying, yeah, right, we'll cancel it, it's all right.
Yeah, no, it worked on that respect. I was just hoping the bomb would go off and put us all out of our misery, to be perfectly honest.
Outrageous. John, what did you feel about
it? Yeah, I mean that to me was the thing, because it again, to have a satisfying story, the Doctor works it out. He goes, surrender, everyone surrenders. Very, again, way too easy a moment for you. And it's really nice that it does that kind of. It deceives you when it goes, oh yeah, we've deleted the guy. He's gone. That's it.
And I think it earns it, because those characters, and his character in particular, is in it throughout. Despite the fact that he dies at the start, his character is in it throughout, and is in it in such a way that like I say, with Stephen Moffat, he gives you all the information, doesn't he? He says it's an AI. He basically says it's an AI that's fighting this battle in the real world. And we've got this AI who could go into the AI world and fight this battle against the AI. But he never sort of, lays it out in such a way that you add it up until it happens. I don't think it was one of Stephen Moffat's best rendered twists. So there's no moment where you go, oh my God, is that what's happening? Oh my God, that's amazing. But I do think, especially given the politics, which I suppose we'll talk about, I don't think it was one of his best rendered twists, but I do think it was one of his more substantial ones, because to me it felt earned on a science fiction level and on a character level.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's more one of or the other, but this I thought was very substantially both. John, were you about to say?
Yeah, no, it does sell. It's I say that once he gets heated, that character has to make that effort. It sells that it's not an easy thing he's doing, and not an easy action, So that is what gives that whole twist, that story, substance to me.
Yeah. And the politics, I thought. So normally Stephen Moffat stories aren't terribly political generally.
Sorry, did you watch Oxygen?
No, Stephen Moffat's penned stories, the stories that he's actually written. No, I don't mean the stories in his era, because there are political stories in his era, but the ones that he's written, generally speaking, are not especially political. And I was saying last week, wasn't I, that I was happy with the politics, and I quite liked the idea that this is an era of Doctor Who that seems to have real world targets in mind that it's gunning for.
It's particularly, as I said, it's America. I said
Well,
you had
yeah.
the opportunity last week. This one, it's about arms sales, it's about AI, it's about inflicting that on us.
Well, yeah, and it's about, and I guess it's about what's happening. There was a whole thing this week about Russia and China and what's happening in the Ukraine, and there was a thing about whether the whole Russia-Ukraine thing could have been avoided if people had sat down early enough with Putin, or not put sort of missiles pointing at Russia right on the very edges of the Russian borders and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't buy into a lot of what I was hearing. But I think the point being that actually the coincidence of that stuff coming out this week and this episode being on this week kind of was a nice reminder that that's what really this is about. Sometimes these wars feel like they're wars for war's sake rather than because of the actual territory. Sometimes.
You give these resonance with contemporary events. That's how essentially you sell that problem of Russell T Davies going, who cares about Planet Zog?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. So actually it managed to, and of course these clerics we've seen them before in Doctor Who as well, and we know where they come from too.
Oh yeah.
So the whole thing sort of, I thought, so I'm kind of with Dylan. I don't think this was one of the great episodes of Doctor Who, but I do think it's the best one we've had probably in about 7 years.
Really? Oh no. Nothing in this run has been as good as Orphan 55 so far.
Fair enough. But I do think, but to make a more serious point, I thought, despite the fact that I don't, and I've only seen it the once, and I've literally just come straight onto this call from having finished watching it, so it's not really had time to settle either. But watching it, I did feel almost everything about the episode was hitting home with me in a way that I don't think any episode has. Okay, so I'm not saying it's the best episode for 7 years, but I think it's the one that's resonated most with me for about 7 years since Stephen Moffat left, just because all different elements. I don't think any one of the elements in particular resonated massively by itself, but I think every element of this story, I don't think there was a weak element in this story anywhere. They all felt like they had a purpose and they were working together.
Yeah, it's the tightest episode I think we've seen. It's really focused in a way we haven't even seen this season. And, and I do like a lot of the Chibnall era, but it has. I don't think there's ever any episode where I'm going, there's something that doesn't work or there's something that doesn't fit in that fits in there. Something always was kind of a jarring element to me.
Yeah, even the Power of the Doctor, which is massively entertaining.
Oh, it's a mess.
It's
a complete mess.
A mad mess. But that's one of the great things about it, is that it's a mad mess. But this was the opposite of a mad mess.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a well thought out, focused script. I feel like, I mean, and I think this is largely true of the last 2 episodes for me, at least anyway, is that felt like somebody else trying to write a Stephen Moffat episode, and the last 2 felt like somebody else trying to find trying to write an RTD episode. It all feels like a parody of like something that was once working and doing the job. It's like when a band gets back together 25 years later and tries to recapture the magic, and it's just like, oh, you're playing all the right notes, but not necessarily in the right order.
I made the point a few weeks ago talking about something else. I can't remember what it was. It must have been something to do with the new series. That I think it was this. I think this must have been when the 3 Tennant specials were on. I think I made the point, or a similar point, to if you come back to something you were doing 15 years ago, let's say, and you want to carry on that thing now, you have to allow for how much that thing will have changed in the 15 years, but B, not overcompensate or undercompensate for the amount of change that it must have had. You have to, it's a really fine line between either tipping into self-parody or else not going far enough that it just looks like you haven't moved on. And I think I think the Tennant and Tate specials, I don't think they'd moved on enough. And then the 3 Shuji Gatwa episodes felt like they'd moved on too much. They felt the first 3 Shuji Gatwa episodes felt a little bit like self-parody, in a way that the Tennant and Tate specials looked a little bit more like a sort of shallow attempt to recapture something without changing it enough. I think maybe for me, this one is the one that strikes a better balance. But I can still see where you're coming from, I think, Dylan.
I think the sense of humour helps here, because the sense of humour is absolutely bleak as hell. That thoughts and prayer stuff. Oh, dear God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the bleak sense of humour works a lot better than certainly the humour in Space Babies, which was not a laugh a minute when I was watching it, but quite the opposite. But yeah, I feel like this and the last episode have perfectly nailed very different types of humour, and done it really well.
Do you know what? Gatwa, I think, because I rewatched Space Babies the day before yesterday, and although I still think it is a really terrible episode, because I'd seen it and knew it was a really terrible episode, I ignored the bits I didn't like and actually managed to get some bits that I did like out of it, I guess. And one of the things that I thought was really apparent on the second viewing is how well Gatwa interacts with some of the other characters. Now, in this case, it was mostly babies. And in the Devil's Chord, I guess, you get a couple of little bits with the Beatles and then a lot of stuff with Maestro. In this one, I think his interactions with some of the other characters, with the dead guy, that sort of AI representation of the dead guy, with the dead guy's kid, and with the woman who's going to be the new companion, I thought his interactions with all of those was brilliant. And with Millie Gibson, when it's just the two of them on the planet, which made it a real shame then when it got back towards the end of the episode and it all went back into sort of bouncing around mode, and I didn't believe in the relationships again anymore. So weird, but I think there is something with Gatwa, and I'm hoping it settles down over the next few weeks so that by the end of the series it all comes together, because it does still feel a bit like they're in that sort of, it feels a little bit like they're still in sort of let's try things out and things aren't quite hitting home.
Yeah, it's very tonally, it's quite uneven. I don't think anybody really knows what they're doing with the characters, and I think some of that's in the script. It's just it all feels, I mean, it all feels a bit amdram to me, to be perfectly honest.
You know, when you're trying to go for something like let's do it in a cartoon style, everybody's got a different idea of what that cartoon style is, right? If you say let's do it like Coronation Street, everybody knows what Coronation Street is, so everybody's on the same page. If you say let's do it like Star Wars, or let's do it like Event Horizon, or let's do it like any one of a million other things, you can put that particular thing in front of somebody and say let's do it like that, and everybody can see that thing and everybody knows. I wonder if the issue here is they're trying to aim for something that's never quite been done, and so not everybody quite knows, and they're all in slightly different places with it.
Possibly. I mean, the cartoon, for me, like a cartoon-esque type thing would be like a Jim Carrey sort of character or something like that, but obviously nobody's playing it like that. So for me, it just comes across as ill thought out performances sometimes, or ill thought out scripting decisions. And I think, love it or loathe it, the last era was very much grounded in it. They were trying to do realistic performances. Whether you think that succeeds is another conversation, but I think that the acting style and the delivery of the characters in the scripts and things like that was the note was realism, whereas here it's not, and I think that's why it jars so heavily with me.
I think the note here for the last 4 weeks from the start of Church on Ruby Road, I think the note here has been James and the Giant Peach meets Event Horizon in various different in various different configurations. But I think that's the note. I think the note is weirdly sort of spooky sci-fi meets children's fantasy, big brash children's fantasy. And I said this before, didn't I? I think there's a kind of a Roald Dahl, let's do something grotesque. And the Space Babies one, I mean, farting spaceships, right? Spaceships powered by the power of a fart.
Yeah.
That's Roald Dahl-esque grotesque type stuff. Maestro was Roald Dahl-esque grotesque type stuff. Even sort of in the background on this one, this is much more Moffat with the sort of tech thing going on. But even the way the tech is kind of realized here, has got this kind of, so it's about the tech is fighting the war for the sake of fighting the war to sort of make money. Even that feels to me like a slightly, so that's kind of what the first sort of quarter of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory feels like, but done in a sort of Event Horizon sci-fi setting. Do you know what I mean? It's got that kind of, there's something hard of sci-fi, weird, spooky, very grown up, bubbling away in the background, the politics as well, I suppose, and the sort of relationships between some of the people. And then at the same time, it's got Grandpa in a bed in the great glass elevator, and spaceships powered by the power of fart. It's Russell T Davies is trying to hit a very strange place because he doesn't want it to be Marvel and he doesn't want it to be Star Wars, but he wants it to fit somewhere in between those two and High School Musical, and it's a very strange thing he's aiming for.
But he wants it to be recognisable to those audiences. That's the thing.
Exactly. Yeah. He's trying to fit
There's elements there.
He's trying to fit a cuboid peg into a round hole, and it's that's a little bit like Event Horizon 2, isn't it? And I don't think it's quite working, but I definitely think this was the most successful so far. At the risk of going on and on and on and on and on, I think that's about it, unless either of you two has got more. Should we?
No. I'll just be a grumpy old git if I say any more.
Yeah, fair enough. Right, I didn't put a piece of paper in front of
you. You are the new JR.
I am. It's. I mean, just to say, like, people seem to be loving it, so I'm obviously in a minority here. But it just isn't working for me. So all these things, what I say about I don't like the performances, I think it's bad acting. That's only my point of view. Like, clearly, lots of people are loving it. It's just not working for me, and it's undone the great work that my hero Chris Chibnall did in the last few seasons.
Dylan, give it a score out of 10 then.
4.
Christ on a bike. That's a Stephen Moffat episode. I can't even edit this now, can I? Because I've done the video. Dylan, how old were you when you were a year older than when you were 6?
So I was 7.
Excellent edit point. So Dylan, John, do you want to give it a score out of 10?
Okay, yeah, I quite like it. As I say, it's suspense, as they say, rather than action. I think was the way it was sold, and that it worked on what it wanted to do. I don't think it's one of those big Stephen Moffat episodes, because I don't think the episode has the narrative placing, nor is he in charge of the series to make it that. So
it's modest for Moffat. In Moffat sort of narrative standards, it's modest, isn't it?
Yeah, it's him coming on. He does a guitar solo. Thank you very much. Off he goes. So yeah, I'd say 8 for me on that.
8, okay. I'm gonna go 7 because I don't think this has the rewatchability factor of something like Blink. Blink's one of those things you can go back to and it still surprises you, even though you know exactly what's happening. Even as I was watching this, I was wondering. So like you say, you kind of peg halfway through that they're actually not fighting against anything at all. In fact, that was fairly obvious pretty much from the start, really. I don't think, and because it's just the one setting and because his foot's on a mine, I think this is one of those things that you come back to maybe once every 10 years rather than once a year or something.
Wait, it's more often you're going to come back to Space Babies, let's face it.
I've done that twice in a week.
Oh my God.
I haven't rewatched Space Babies yet. I haven't had the time.
Yeah.
So.
There'll never be the time.
I'm not saying that, but
well, now that I've done it twice in a week, they never. But then again, I watched it with my 9-year-old, and he absolutely loved Space Babies. So he hated Church on Ruby Road, and he hated Devil's Cord, which he saw before Space Babies just through an accident of when it was on telly, and he had caught it live. Whereas this one he's watched, and he loved Space Babies. He hated the other two, and he loved Space Babies. So what can you say?
Is he watching Boom on Transmission then?
He's not watched it. I guess he'll probably watch it with me one afternoon next week. I'll show it to him one afternoon next week, maybe. He's going through a real big Star Wars phase at the moment, so Doctor Who's kind of take it or leave it at the moment. That's 9-year-olds for you. Rubbish.
Yeah, and it's not like Star Wars as a franchise has ever disappointed its fans.
Oh, right. We'll be back next week to talk about 73 Yards. That's what next week's is called, isn't it?
It is.
This looks like a Dr. Light episode.
Yeah, from the trailers.
And I think that the following week, Dot and Bubble is also a Dr. Light episode in some respects. There was talk that Ncuti Gatwa was still in the midst of recording Sex Education and had to take some time away from Doctor Who to carry on doing Sex Education. So it might be that in an 9-episode run, there's 2 episodes in which the Doctor doesn't feature much.
Well, that means a lot more Millie Gibson.
But also, it kind of fits into that. If there's a television program or a story being told about the television program or the story being told, that's kind of one of the things you can do is take the lead character out and focus on the supporting players for a bit. I don't know. But I do think it maybe plays slightly into this meta-textual, what the hell is going on here kind of thing. We'll see. But we'll be back to do that. Until then, I was JR.
I was Dylan.
And I was John.
And we will speak again soon.